Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Paperback Empire. If you are new, my name is Lauren, and today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of January. So overall, I feel like I had a pretty good reading month for January. I read a little over 3,000 pages across 7 books. I had a 2.5 star, a few 3.5 stars, and 1 4.5 star. I think though for this video, for my first wrap up, I am just going to talk about them in the order that I read them in. The first book I read in 2021 was The Toll by Neal Shusterman. This is the last book in the Arc of Scythe trilogy. Since this is the last book in the series, I'm not going to go too in depth about what this book in particular is about, but if you're unfamiliar with the Arc of Scythe, kind of the overall concept of it, it is a dystopian, utopian fiction. It's a young adult book, and it is about a futuristic society where, among other things, death has been conquered. So people are able to pretty much live indefinitely if they want to. Because there is no natural death in this society, one threat that remains is overpopulation. So there are individuals who are called scythes, and it is their responsibility to keep the population under control. And the way that they do that is through periodically taking lives. So overall, I really enjoyed The Toll. I felt like it did some interesting things, which I think was mostly enjoyable. It also did a really good job sort of continuing to develop the character of the antagonist. One of my favorite characters in this story, in fact, is the villain of the story. I mean, there are a number of kind of villains in the story, but the primary villain, I really like this character. The way his character grew and kind of wound up at the end, I really liked his story and how it concluded in this book. That being said, I feel like this book, it did have some problems, and for me, the main issue that I had with this book is that it introduced way too many new characters. This book had a lot of exposition in it, which I think for the final book in a series is kind of, I don't know, that's a risky move, and I'm not sure that it paid off. There was also, I think, there was supposed to be some commentary that I didn't quite get. There is a group of people in this futuristic society called the Tonists. They don't really believe in any of these modern advancements of this society. And they are it's almost like a religious order. I feel like there was supposed to be some sort of religious commentary. I'm not exactly sure. It wasn't clear to me what it was trying to say exactly. Overall, though, I did like this book. I feel like it did its job as a book. It entertained me. And for that, I feel like this book gets 3 stars. I didn't love it, though. I feel like it was average. It didn't fit in with the series very well. But it was still all right. So 3 stars for The Toll. The next book that I read this month was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is a story of a woman in 18th century France who she doesn't want to live the life of a woman during that time period, which is marrying young, having children, working in the home, and then, just that's it, then you die. So she makes this deal with the dark entity, which essentially grants her immortality. The sort of the consequence of this, though, is that she cannot leave her mark on the world. So she can't write, she can't draw. If she tries to do these things, the ink just vanishes. She doesn't leave footprints, she doesn't leave fingerprints. That also means that she cannot be remembered. So if she meets someone, the moment that she is out of their sight, they forget her. This book has been raved about on BookTube, and everyone loved it when it came out, but it's starting to kind of reach a period of backlash where people are going back on it and they don't like it anymore, which I think is pretty common for books that receive this kind of attention and this kind of love. I'm a little late to the bandwagon reading it, but that's okay. I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic. The language in it I thought was absolutely beautiful. A lot of people have had complaints about it being too flowery. So I think whether or not you would enjoy this, the writing in this book would have a lot to do with how straightforward you like the writing in books to be. I also grew really attached to Addie as a character. There aren't a whole lot of characters in this book. There are a couple others, but really it is by and large focused on Addie LaRue, and because of this, her character is really developed well. And I became, by the end of this book, I was really attached to her as a character. I feel like this book was well paced, especially considering that it spans about 300 years. And I mean, this is not a particularly fat book, and that's a pretty big chunk of time. One thing that I feel like could be improved upon with this book, you really kind of want to see her reaction to changes. You want to see her reaction to wars, and you want to see her reaction to different social movements. And it's noticeably lacking in this book. That being said, I don't think that that's really what this book was trying to do. I think this book was supposed to be a whole lot more internal for the character, and sort of her internal struggle and trying to deal with her circumstance. So I think overall, I would give this book 4.5 stars. I got super wrapped up in it. I mean, it absolutely gripped me. I would not give it 5 stars though, because there is one thing that happened at the end, kind of a trope that I'm not fond of. It was a very small piece of the puzzle though, so I wouldn't dock it that much for it. But yeah, it did have this one little element that it was kind of an eye roll for me. Otherwise, I absolutely love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And if anything that I've said about this book, any of the description sounds intriguing to you, I highly recommend this book. The third book that I read in January was The Descendant of the Crane by Joan He. This book is set in ancient China. It is a young adult fantasy. And when the book opens, we meet our protagonist, who is a princess, and her father has died. She's convinced that he was murdered, and so she sets out to figure out what happened, who did it. In this society, magic has been outlawed, so it's about this princess character pretty much getting some of these like outlaw soothsayers, really is what they are. They're seers, they're soothsayers, enlisting their help to gather evidence to figure out what happened to her father. As she is gathering evidence to support her claim of her father being murdered, she discovers a lot of information, a lot of hidden history about this kingdom that she didn't know about. This book also spends a lot of time in kind of a courtroom setting. This is honestly a strange combination of fantasy, historical fiction, and like courtroom procedural drama. It was an odd combination of genres for me. I don't know if you read this. Let me know in the comments like what your take on like the fusion of genres that were present in this book. So I think that this is Joan He's debut novel, and it shows, it really does. I think that this book conceptually is actually really good. I enjoyed the concept of it. I feel like it was atmospheric, like it definitely felt, I got like those ancient China vibes. It had a good structure and a good skeleton, but that's kind of all it had. Was just, it felt It felt like a first draft. I feel like it needed another pass or two by the author. For as good as the concept was, I don't feel like it was particularly well executed. The characters, I don't think, were as developed as they could have been. And there were just some missed opportunities in this book. There were some cool things in this book. For example, there were hidden passageways and tunnels, which I feel like is fodder for like some really fun and interesting things. Not a lot of time was spent in them. Some just, kind of getting from one place to the other occasionally, but I feel like that was a missed opportunity. A lot could have been done with that. What was there was good, but it wasn't all there. So because of that, I give this book 2.5 stars. I think if it had been better developed, it would have gotten more, but yeah, 2.5 stars for The Descendant of the Crane. The fourth book that I read this month was The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. This is a young adult contemporary fiction. It is about, I think, like a sleeping sickness that hits this small town. When it starts out, there's a college-age girl who falls asleep and can't be roused. And before you know it, it's spreading. They realize that it must be some type of disease and it is contagious. And people all throughout the small town begin to fall asleep and are unable to be woken. It is told from a great many number of POVs. I didn't even keep track of them. There's got to be at least 10 or 12 different POVs. It had a really interesting writing style. It felt a little bit detached. Once you get used to it, it starts to make a whole lot of sense for what this book, kind of the concept of this book, which is people sleeping and dreaming. And that writing perspective feels kind of trance-like, and it feels a little bit sort of distant and hazy and dreamy. So it actually, ultimately, I feel like that was a good choice on the author's part. This book also had a great buildup. It was a page turner. Like, I got really, really invested in this book. Very like that feeling of what is going on? Like, it's just escalating and more people are getting sick and falling asleep. And just throughout the whole book, you're just getting more and more drawn in, like wanting to know like what is going on and why this is happening. Unfortunately, I feel like the ending of this book kind of let it down. I don't want to give anything away. I don't want to spoil anything, but the way it builds up, I was kind of expecting something a little bit more. I don't know, I expected it to kind of go out with a bang whenever a book has that kind of build up. And I would say this book sort of went quietly into the night, so to speak. Overall, though, I would give this book 3 stars. I think that although the ending kind of let it down, it was so engaging. It was such an interesting concept, such a unique concept. It was fun to read. This was an easy read. It was a quick read. Not my favorite book. I don't think that I would read it again, but conceptually pretty awesome. If that description sounds good to you, then I would really recommend that you give The Dreamers a try. The 5th book that I read in January was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is an adult literary fiction. It is set at a prestigious college in New England, and it follows this group of students. They study classics. When the book opens, I think it's in the prologue, it hints at them having killed someone, one of their peers maybe. And this book is really about all of the things that took place and led up to this murder. Our protagonist in this story is probably like a lower middle class, kind of an average guy, and all of his friends are upper class, very wealthy. This story is very well written. Donna Tartt is a very, very good writer. She's a very talented writer. Also, the concept was very good. It was very intriguing. The stakes felt really high, in spite of the fact that this book, it didn't have a huge plot. The stakes still felt very high, and I felt very invested in the storyline. However, the dialogue in this story was really unrealistic. The way the characters talked to each other was really unbelievable for how old the characters were. Like, they would say things like, "Oh, a jolly good waistcoat there, sir." These are like 20-year-olds. I don't care how wealthy you are. That is just like, no, that like people that old, no matter how much money they have or like what time period they're in, people that are like 20 just don't talk like that. And what that essentially did was make it really difficult to pinpoint what the time period was in this book. At different parts and different things that were mentioned, I was like, oh, this must be, there's hippies mentioned, so this must be the 60s or the 70s. Oh, there's beatniks. So there's, but there's this kind of person, there's that kind of person. Oh, and then finally, I think maybe halfway through the book, the characters went to see some movie that I think was released in the 80s. So I was like, okay, this must be the 80s. So the dialogue really helped to confuse the time period. This book was also really difficult for me to get into. This book, I think it's like about 560 pages. So the first 100 pages, I was just not in it. Then for about 200 pages, I would say, it was really intriguing. I was really into it. And then that is about where the main climax happened. And we still had a couple 100 pages left to go. So the rest of the book just kind of meandered for like 200 pages. So the pacing didn't quite work for me. Overall, though, the concept was really good and it was so well written. Donna Tartt is a great writer. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I still feel like it was worthwhile to read it. It had its problems, but yeah, an average read for me. The 6th book that I read in January was The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is the story of a young woman named Evie O'Neill, and it takes place in the 20s, and it is about Evie being sent off to New York City to live with her uncle as a punishment for having sort of stirred up a lot of drama and trouble in her small hometown. And it is about her, along with her uncle, being pulled into helping solve a murder. She has kind of a supernatural ability along with a number of other characters that we meet over the course of the story, and that kind of helps her to figure out what's going on with this murderer. Whenever I picked up this book, I thought that it was going to be kind of a historical fiction mystery. This book, in my opinion, is a horror, and it is most similar in the concept and the feel to the book It by Stephen King. And the reason I say that is that this book has this dark force that has been unleashed and that is like terrorizing everyone. In It is terrorizing these children, but in The Diviners, it's sort of terrorizing everyone. There are a group of young people that have to band together to figure out what's going on. Also, there is sort of like a layer for this dark force, so to speak, much like in It, where it is pulling its power. This book was really fun. It was really fast-paced. It was incredibly atmospheric and creepy. The murder scenes in this book are grisly, to say the least. Whenever I would read this at night, I would get creeped out walking around in the dark in my house. It only had a couple of POVs. I don't like a book that has a ton of characters in it and you're just switching back and forth between them all every chapter. It can be hard to keep hold of what's going on in a book like this. I think this one just basically has about 2. One thing I wasn't terribly fond of is that this book really kind of overdid it for me on the 20s lingo. It was a little distracting. Like every time any character talked, there was some sort of like 20s slang or whatever. And it would kind of, it got to me a little. It would pull me out of the story a little bit. Also, the protagonist, Evie O'Neill, is incredibly unlikable. I don't feel like I have to like characters to like a book at all. But it does bother me when I sense that a character was not meant to be unlikable, but is. And I think that this character is supposed to be likable, but she's so reckless and self-indulgent and self-centered. And honestly, I felt like for most of the book, I was just on the edge of my seat waiting for her to kind of get her comeuppance. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I would give it, I think, 3.5 stars, which isn't just an excellent rating. Most of that is really just because of all the 20s lingo that got on my nerves. If that hadn't been an issue, I probably would have given this a full star more. I think I will probably continue in this series. I really enjoyed this book. It did creep me out. It did weird me out, but it hooked me. I felt invested in it. So if the next book comes my way at, a good price or whatever, I would probably continue with this series. The final book that I read in the month of January was The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. I actually just finished this yesterday and I am still stewing on it. I've got some mixed feelings on it. This is a fantasy book. I guess I would loosely categorize this as a high fantasy, but really more of a grimdark fantasy. And it is about this group of young men who are, they're street thieves. They grew up together. This book is about them kind of conceiving of what is really a long con, and they are going to steal a bunch of money from this very wealthy couple in this community. The plan is a very precarious house of cards, so to speak, the way all of the things that need to happen for them to be able to pull this off, and how that plan begins to, or threatens to, kind of fall apart. This is kind of a bro book. This is a dude book. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Chick-lit exists in the world, and so bro-lit can exist too, and that's fine. So The Lies of Lamora, I believe, is Scott Lynch's debut novel, and it is unbelievably well written. I feel like for a lot of authors to write a book this well, it would probably be considered their magnum opus. It is really that well written. The structure I wasn't incredibly wild about. It bounces back and forth between the present day and the past, the childhood of this gang of young men, and how they kind of grew up and learned how to be thieves. And it switches nonstop, like every other section, it switches back and forth. And really it would pull me out of the story. Also, the tone of this book, I'm not gonna lie, it was a bummer. And I don't know if it's just that it's grimdark or if it's the story in particular. It probably has more to do with it being this story in particular, because it has a lot of commentary on really like the wealth gap and the oppression of the poor and everything that they have happened to them and things that they do to other people. Like it's bleak. To put it lightly, this book is quite bleak. Like the last 20% of this book, though, for as big of a bummer as this book was overall, it stuck the landing. This, in my opinion, was probably one of the best endings that I've ever read in a book. I am really torn on how to rate this book, because for the majority of the book, my enjoyment of this was about 2 out of 5 stars. The very ending of this book was 5 out of 5 stars. So I guess put that all together and I would give this maybe 3 or 3.5 stars. This is definitely worth reading. If that description sounds good to you, I definitely recommend you pick it up, especially if you enjoy grimdark and you haven't read this book. I can almost guarantee that you will love The Lies of Lamora. So I think that's going to be it for me today. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of January. I would love to know if you have read any of these books. What did you think about them? I would love to talk to you about it down in the comments below. So please let me know if you've read any of them and what you thought. Also, did you read any books that you really loved in January? I'm always looking for awesome book recommendations. So if there was anything you loved, please tell me about it down below. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will like and subscribe. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.